I want to welcome you to the 2010 campaign season, because as far as I can tell, 2010 campaign season starts tomorrow. Tomorrow's the anniversary of President Obama signing the law that has become the unexpected sleeper issue of the 2010 campaign.
The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that I will sign today, a plan that meets the principles I laid out in January, is the most sweeping economic recovery package in our history.
At the one-year anniversary of the stimulus, it is turning out to offer not just economic recovery, but also democratic political recovery. Democrats have basically three things to do between now and November. One, they need to get good candidates to defend their open seats. Number two, they need to pass health reform. And number three, they need to embarrass Republicans on their hypocrisy. The stimulus has been a gift-wrapped opportunity for Democrats to show how Republicans have denounced Democratic legislation in Washington for political effect and then admitted in their home districts that that legislation works. It shows not only that Democratic policies work, and when push comes to shove in their home districts, Republicans know it. It also shows that Republicans care so little about policy that they're okay with holding totally nonsensically contradictory positions on important stuff. Dozens of congressional Republicans who have praised, say, the stimulus at home while denouncing it in Washington seem to be unembarrassed about how two-faced and incoherent it is to have those two positions simultaneously. At least they have seemed to be unembarrassed. Tonight, I am pleased to report, we have some early signs of embarrassment. Among those snared in the stimulus hypocrisy web is Republican Senator James Mountain Inhofe of Oklahoma. Last week, we noted that Senator Inhofe had proudly attacked the stimulus over the course of the past year, but he was caught touting stimulus spending in his state as, quote, great news. In light of that reporting, Senator Inhofe has gone for help to a conservative media outlet called CNS News, complaining about us. He said, quote, she would now like her viewers to believe that because Senator Inhofe praised stimulus money going to Oklahoma, that Senator Inhofe is somehow a hypocrite. Hardly. That was the quote from Senator Inhofe's office. For the record, Mr. Inhofe's office has not asked our show for a correction. And in fact, none will be offered. I understand that being called a political hypocrite is an awful thing to hear. But you can't just insist that you're not to be called a hypocrite if your record indicates that you are one. Senator Inhofe, in fact, praised toxic Superfund cleanup spending in Oklahoma that was part of the stimulus. He praised it as great news and necessary funds. Then he denounced the stimulus that provided those necessary funds as something that didn't work. He told this same outfit, CNS News, that the stimulus bill was nothing but social engineering and welfare. Oh, and those necessary funds that were great news for my state. If you are both praising something as necessary and saying it doesn't work, you are a hypocrite. You may not want to be called a hypocrite, but the solution to that is don't act like one. Don't just complain about people who accurately report how you do act, okay? Same goes for more than a dozen other Republican lawmakers singled out by the Wall Street Journal today. Congressional Republicans, including Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, Sue Myrick of North Carolina, Gene Schmidt of Ohio, Senators John Cornyn and Kay Bailey Hutchison of Texas, Bob Bennett of Utah, not to mention the entire Alabama congressional delegation. All of these Republicans have been caught on the record requesting stimulus money for ways they thought it could help their states and districts after voting against the stimulus and trashing it as something that was useless. You guys, it's either useless or it's useful. It cannot be both. Now, the Wall Street Journal obtained letters that these Republicans wrote requesting stimulus funds, and the evidence is amazing. It's certainly nothing short of damning. In her request, for example, Gene Schmidt of Ohio writes, quote, this project will not only save jobs, but create multiple jobs within southern Ohio. Paul Ryan says the funds will help, quote, place 1,000 workers in green jobs. Alabama Senators Richard Shelby and Jeff Sessions, they write, quote, This money would help provide jobs for chemical applicators, foresters, and others who would be involved in the state's Konkan Grass Eradication and Control Program. Senator Bennett of Utah says the addition of federal funds to these projects would maximize the stimulative effect of these projects on the economy. These projects will help the economy of Utah. Sue Myrick of North Carolina, this is genius. The stimulus funding would, quote, lead to solar energy-related jobs in an area hard hit by unemployment. She also calls it a critical step in bringing economic opportunities to my congressional district. We have an urgent need, she says, for a workforce that is truly prepared to contribute to the green economy. So says Sue Myrick, member of Congress, on her letterhead, writing and asking for these stimulus funds that were going to provide all of these useful things in her district that she's simultaneously saying is a totally useless program. These Republicans are acknowledging in writing that the stimulus is good policy, that it works, thus proving that they don't mean it when they denounce the stimulus as worthless. It is worth noting that today's expose on this was published in the conservative Wall Street Journal. The other big expose on Republican hypocrisy was published in the last week in the ultra-conservative Washington Times. These are conservative papers calling out Republicans for hypocrisy. This is the important thing here. The hypocrisy epidemic among Republicans is trouble for them in politics this year. And that's not just because it energizes Democrats and liberals and reminds them of why they believe it's important to keep these guys from taking the majority again. It's also important because it separates Republicans from the people the Republicans would like to have as their own base. The Republican Party chairman, Michael Steele, for example, met with self-styled Tea Party leaders today in Washington. What's his message on spending going to be to those small government, anti-Washington conservatives? What's his message going to be? Vote for us. Half the time we'll say we agree with you, and the other half the time we hope you don't notice. Joining us now is the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Tim Kaine. Mr. Kaine is also the former governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Nice to have you on the program.
Always glad to be with you, Rachel. Thanks.
Let me give you a chance to correct me first on something that I made up. I said what Democrats need to do to win in the midterms this year is they need good candidates for open seats, they need to pass health reform, and they need to make sure everyone in the country, left, right, and center, knows about Republican hypocrisy on policy. Does that bear any resemblance to the actual Democratic game plan?
You pretty much nailed it. I mean, there is one more, which is we've got to continue to push forward with programs like the Recovery Act so that the economy continues to improve. 2 quarters of GDP growth in a row is good. Job losses dropping from 720,000 a month to kind of almost net even is good, but we've got a ways to go still. So that would be my 4th element. Obviously, the president's been focused on that since day one. But the other 3 are right. You know, we're going to tell the success story. We're going to point out Republicans who have been engaged in this hypocrisy, acknowledging that the stimulus is good while pretending before the cameras that they're against it. And then the candidate recruitment and making sure that our folks are energized to support the candidates is the key. In a tough climate, in a tough year, I think we're going to do better than people expect.
On this issue of hypocrisy, and we've been talking about it a lot on this show, we're no longer the only ones doing it, it seems like there is a lesson for Democrats here, too, on policy. Why would you try to compromise and find common ground with people who reject their own ideas, who hold 2 totally opposite positions on the same policy at the same time? It's like trying to divide by 0. I mean, is there not a sort of message here for governing Democrats in terms of the futility of trying to find bipartisan policy solutions?
Well, Rachel, here's the way I would say it. I think what the American public wants to see is this is a time of national urgency and emergency. They do want to see people working together. The Democrats have been willing to do all this heavy lifting while the Republicans have made a decision to be obstructionists and vote no, even to hope that these policies fail. Nevertheless, I think they still want to see us reaching out to try to get them engaged. We shouldn't be diluting what we're doing to chase after non-existent votes, but we should still be reaching out and asking for ideas. And if the other side has good ideas, then those should go into the policies that we put together. I think that's been the president's strategy. We're going to keep reaching out. We're going to keep listening. But we also have got to demand that the other guys take their governing responsibilities seriously. And when they engage in these kind of political games, like around the stimulus funding, talking out of both sides of their mouth, we got to point it out.
I know on health reform that you think it is important for the country. I know that you think it is important policy.
Yep.
In purely political terms, do you think it is important for Democrats, for the November elections, that health reform is passed soon?
Rachel, I do. I think it is absolutely critical. It's critical because, as you point out, Americans need it. The insured need more security from abuses by insurance companies, and the uninsured need a path to affordable coverage for the first time in this country. And we definitely need to figure out a way to stop these back-breaking premium increases and the costs that are going to keep skyrocketing absent meaningful reform. So it has to happen because it's good policy. But I also agree with you politically. It's a measure of our coherence and our ability to make things happen as Democrats that we follow the president's lead and get health reform done. Just came out of a meeting about that, and it's just incredibly important that the Dems make it happen.
When you say you just came out of a meeting about that, are you telling us that something's about to happen?
No, that is not. This is a kind of a strategy meeting. I'm within my own pay grade. I'm the guy who's leading the party, but I'm asking questions about it, and I know that there's intense activity to try to find that path to success. It's a harder path to find when the other guys have made a decision that 100% of their game is going to be throwing up roadblocks.